She tried to take over her husband's home until his first wife returned. The sun had just begun its climb over the horizon. Light spread slowly over the village of Kilimani. Small clay homes sat close together with thatched roofs and walls sun-baked to deep ochre. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Chickens clucked softly. Children ran barefoot through dusty paths carrying bowls of water. In this village, life moved slowly. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone watched everything. In one corner of Kilimani, a large compound stood fenced with tall wooden stakes. The house inside was simple yet proud. Its doors had been polished with cow fat and the floor swept clean. This was the home of Mutiso, a man who was neither rich nor poor. He had inherited his place from his father, and for years he had lived with his first wife, Naliaka. She was calm and steady. Her hands were worn from work, but her voice carried kindness. She tended the garden, prepared meals for the family, and greeted visitors with soft smiles. Neighbors trusted her. Children ran to her for stories. Even Mutiso's friends felt welcome when they sat under the shade of the mango tree in the yard. But peace in Kilimani was fragile. Life was measured in small gestures and respect. When the second wife, Wanjiku, arrived from a distant village, everything shifted. Wanjiku was young and ambitious. She had eyes that searched constantly for what she might gain. She came with promises of modern ideas. She came with baskets of gifts from Mutiso's household, and slowly she began to push her way in. It began quietly. Naliaka noticed Wanjiku lingering in the kitchen longer than needed. She noticed the way Mutiso's attention drifted. Wanjiku would smile at visitors, whisper jokes that made them laugh. Naliaka did not speak at first. She had learned long ago that confrontation only invited trouble. Instead, she watched. She observed every small act, every word, every slight. Wanjiku moved deliberately. She rearranged the seating in the main room so that Mutiso would sit beside her during meals. She complimented the neighbors openly and praised her own cooking. Slowly, she began to take charge of decisions: the planting of crops, the purchase of goats, even the schedule for fetching water. Village women started whispering. Some said Naliaka had grown too old to care for the household. Others said Mutiso had been enchanted by Wanjiku's beauty. Naliaka smiled softly when the gossip reached her ears. She continued her work in the garden. She continued to serve meals. She kept her head low. One morning, the sun rose slowly and Wanjiku appeared in the courtyard carrying a bundle of maize. She announced that she would take over the preparation of the meals from that day forward. Naliaka did not protest. She stepped aside with her hands folded in front of her. Mutiso looked uneasy. He wanted to speak, but Wanjiku's smile made him pause. She was clever with words. She praised the children and thanked them for their help. Then she said gently that the house needed order and that she had a plan. Mutiso nodded. He felt relief that someone was helping. As days passed, Wanjiku's influence grew. She directed the servants. She set rules that were new and strict. She even decided which corners of the house Naliaka could use. Slowly, Naliaka became invisible in her own home. She ate at the far end of the table. She no longer sat under the mango tree with neighbors. And still she said nothing. She worked quietly. She watched quietly. And she carried the memory of the home as it had once been. The village began to notice changes. Children whispered at school about the new rules in Mutiso's house. Women gathered near the river and spoke softly about Wanjiku's growing control. Even the elders felt uneasy. In Kilimani, traditions were strong. The first wife had respect. She had place. To see her step aside was unsettling. One evening, as the sky turned deep orange and the fireflies began to glow, Naliaka sat under the mango tree. Her hands rested in her lap. Her eyes followed the paths of the children returning from school. Mutiso came to sit beside her. He did not speak at first. The wind rustled the leaves above them. Naliaka glanced at him quietly. Mutiso spoke softly. He confessed he felt torn. Wanjiku's presence was heavy. He knew she was ambitious. He knew she was clever. But he also knew the home he had built with Naliaka was slipping. He feared losing what had always been steady and true. Naliaka said nothing. She let him speak and allowed the evening to settle around them. The next morning, Wanjiku announced she had decided which fields would be planted with maize and which with cassava. She directed the laborers with a sharpness that had not been there before. Naliaka followed the instructions silently. She tended to the smaller chores. She swept the floors. She collected firewood. Every day the house felt smaller. Every day her voice grew softer. Neighbors continued to whisper. Some offered advice. Some tried to mediate. But Wanjiku dismissed them politely with a smile that carried hidden edges. She had learned quickly the strength of appearances. She kept her words soft, but her actions sharp. She built a web around Mutiso's household that seemed harmless at first but tightened steadily. One afternoon, Naliaka walked to the river to fetch water. She carried the clay pot with careful hands. Children ran past her, laughing. Birds chirped in the trees. She paused to watch the reflection of the sky on the calm surface. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember how the home had felt before, how laughter had spread freely, how the neighbors had stopped by without hesitation, how Mutiso had laughed alongside her. She carried that memory like a fragile gift. When she returned home, Wanjiku was arranging the courtyard. She looked up and smiled. She said nothing of the river. She said nothing of the memories. She simply continued to direct. The house hummed with quiet tension. No doors were closed in anger. No voices shouted. Everything moved slowly. Yet every day the balance shifted further away from Naliaka. Mutiso observed silently. He felt guilt, but did not know how to intervene. He felt love, but struggled to speak it. And Naliaka, who had always been the center of the home, moved quietly at the edges. The sun sank low and the evening settled across the village. Smoke from fires mingled with the scent of fresh earth. Children returned home from their games. Women called from doorways. The mango tree cast long shadows. Naliaka sat and watched the life around her continue. She had endured. She had survived. And deep within she waited. Days turned slowly into weeks. The rhythm of Kilimani remained the same. Children ran barefoot along dusty paths. Goats wandered near the fences. The sun rose and fell with gentle predictability. Yet within Mutiso's household, a quiet storm was building. Wanjiku's influence grew steadily. She arranged the cooking schedule. She directed the planting of the small vegetable plots. She even chose who would sleep in which corner of the compound. All of it she did without harsh words. Everything appeared proper and calm, but the house itself carried tension. Naliaka moved as if she had learned a secret language of endurance. She completed her chores with care. She prepared meals in silence. She collected water and firewood with steady hands. Yet the villagers noticed how she no longer smiled when Wanjiku passed by, how she avoided Mutiso's gaze, how she spoke only when spoken to. Some whispered that she had lost her spirit. Others said that the strength of her patience was deeper than anyone understood. Wanjiku, unaware of the quiet resistance, continued her plans. She wanted the house to reflect her taste and her authority. She brought new mats and cushions. She rearranged the furniture. She even instructed the children on how to address her properly in public. Mutiso tried to speak, suggesting that certain things could wait, but Wanjiku smiled and nodded. She had learned to appear respectful while bending the household to her will. Mutiso felt the weight of it all, but could not find the courage to oppose her firmly. One afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, a visitor arrived. He was an elder from a neighboring village who often helped mediate disputes. The children ran to greet him. Naliaka greeted him with a soft smile. Wanjiku met him at the gate and invited him into the main room. The elder observed the house carefully. He noted the arrangement of mats. He noted who sat where. And when he spoke, his voice carried calm authority. He asked about the planting and the labor of the household. Wanjiku explained clearly. Naliaka said nothing. The elder nodded politely, but his eyes lingered on Naliaka. After some quiet moments, he said that the first wife had long been the pillar of the home, that traditions carried weight, that every home was strongest when respect was shared. Wanjiku smiled, but her eyes flickered. The elder left soon after, quietly observing the tension that filled the air like a slow wind. As the weeks continued, village whispers grew louder. Women met by the river. They spoke softly about the unfairness of Naliaka's situation. Children returned from school and shared small stories of the household's quiet strife. Even Mutiso's friends began to notice. They spoke in low voices, careful not to offend. The balance of the house was no longer certain. The presence of Wanjiku was strong. The absence of Naliaka's freedom was palpable. One morning, Naliaka awoke to find the courtyard swept differently. Wanjiku had directed the arrangement of pots and tools. Naliaka stepped carefully around the changes. She did not complain. She tended the fire. She prepared breakfast. Mutiso came to the courtyard. He looked at the house. He felt a pang of sorrow. He missed the old rhythms. He missed the days when his home was filled with laughter and ease. That afternoon, children ran past the fence, carrying stories from school. One of them stopped to whisper about the neighbors' opinions. Naliaka listened quietly. She understood that the village was noticing. She understood that the balance of respect was shifting slowly back in her favor. She did not celebrate. She did not speak. She simply watched. She moved among her tasks with calm patience. Evenings settled with long shadows. Smoke from fires rose lazily into the darkening sky. Naliaka sat beneath the mango tree and watched the stars appear. She remembered how Mutiso had once laughed freely at her stories. She remembered the taste of meals she had cooked with love and care. She allowed herself a quiet thought of hope. If the house could survive these weeks, perhaps the home itself would speak truth to everyone. Meanwhile, Wanjiku continued her careful control. She did not notice the subtle resistance. She believed her authority secure. She praised the children when they followed her rules. She smiled at the neighbors when they came to visit. She was careful with words. She was clever with timing. Yet she had underestimated the patience of Naliaka. She had underestimated the loyalty of those who had witnessed the home in its first form. One evening, Mutiso spoke softly to Wanjiku. He suggested that some traditions should be respected, that certain corners of the house had been assigned for a reason. Wanjiku smiled, agreeing politely, but she continued to assert her plans in small, unnoticed ways. Mutiso remained quiet. He felt torn between desire for harmony and loyalty to the home he had built with Naliaka. The next morning, Naliaka rose before the sun. She carried water from the river. She swept the yard. She prepared food for the children with care. She did not speak to Wanjiku unless necessary. She observed quietly. The village continued to watch. They whispered softly among themselves. Their eyes followed every small interaction. The elders nodded slowly. They understood the slow rhythm of village justice. The first wife's place was not easily removed. It could not be erased overnight. The days moved forward gently. Naliaka carried on. Wanjiku continued her plans. Mutiso observed quietly. The household hummed with the subtle tension of competing wills. Yet beneath it all was the quiet endurance of Naliaka. She knew that time, the slow rhythm of the village, and the quiet judgment of neighbors could not be ignored. She waited and she observed. As the sun set that evening, the village felt the calm and familiar peace of night. Smoke from cooking fires mingled with the scent of fresh earth. Children settled near their mothers. Chickens roosted in the yard. Naliaka remained beneath the mango tree. Her hands rested in her lap. Her eyes followed the slow movement of the stars. She had endured many days. She had endured many quiet injustices. And deep within, a subtle hope began to grow. The days grew longer and the sun climbed high over Kilimani. Life continued with its gentle rhythms. Women gathered at the river to wash clothes. Children ran barefoot along dusty paths, laughing. The elders met under the shade of the large fig tree to discuss matters of the village. But within Mutiso's compound, a quiet tension remained. Naliaka moved through the house with careful steps. Every task she completed seemed ordinary, yet every movement carried weight. She had endured the presence of Wanjiku for many weeks, but her patience was not empty. Wanjiku continued her plans with a careful hand. She directed the household laborers. She arranged the cooking and sleeping areas. She even instructed the children on proper manners in the home. To an outsider, everything seemed orderly. To those who knew the rhythms of the house, the order felt forced. The balance that had once allowed the home to breathe freely was now strained. Mutiso watched silently. He felt the tug of loyalty to Naliaka and the pull of politeness toward Wanjiku. He had grown cautious. He did not know how to act without angering one or pleasing the other. One afternoon, as the sun began to descend, a distant figure appeared on the path leading to the compound. The villagers paused to watch. Children stopped their games. Women returned from the river. And Naliaka looked and saw the familiar figure of her sister-in-law, Mumbi, returning from a distant village. Mumbi had always been a voice of reason. Her presence carried weight. She moved with careful purpose and her eyes swept over the compound with quiet observation. Wanjiku noticed too, and smiled politely, though a shadow of uncertainty flickered across her face. Mumbi's return changed the rhythm of the household. She greeted Naliaka warmly and asked after her health. She spoke gently to Mutiso, offering advice in a way that respected his authority, but reminded him of his duties. Wanjiku tried to maintain her control. She spoke softly, smiled often, and arranged small tasks around the house. Yet the balance had begun to shift. The villagers whispered quietly to one another. They noticed the calm authority of Mumbi. They understood her presence as more than a visit. Naliaka's quiet endurance seemed to gain strength. She continued her chores with steady hands. She prepared meals. She fetched water. She cared for the children. Yet each act now carried a sense of quiet assertion. Wanjiku noticed small things. The way Naliaka spoke to Mutiso. The way she arranged the cooking utensils. The way the neighbors greeted her with warmth. It was subtle, but it was a shift. The next morning, the compound felt different. Wanjiku entered the courtyard to direct the laborers. She called the children to follow her instructions, but Naliaka stepped forward gently. She reminded the workers of small traditions. She spoke of the proper way to prepare the soil. She directed the children on the care of the animals. Her words were calm. Her voice carried authority without force. Mutiso watched quietly, feeling relief and admiration. He understood that the household was beginning to find its old rhythm again. By mid-afternoon, the villagers had begun to visit more openly. Some women came to borrow utensils. Some came to share news from the market, and each time, they greeted Naliaka with warmth and respect. Wanjiku's control began to feel fragile. Her careful words and polite instructions were met with gentle corrections from Naliaka. Her smiles were no longer enough to mask the shift in authority. One evening, the fireflies began their slow dance in the yard. Naliaka sat beneath the mango tree with Mumbi. Mutiso joined them quietly. The children played nearby. The elders observed from a distance. Naliaka spoke softly about the rhythms of the home, about what was proper, about what had been forgotten. Mumbi nodded and offered guidance. Mutiso listened in silence, feeling a mix of relief and quiet pride. The balance of the household began to tip back toward its rightful rhythm. The following days were marked by subtle confrontations. Wanjiku tried to assert her plans. She moved furniture. She instructed the children. She adjusted schedules. Yet every small act was met with calm correction from Naliaka. The villagers began to notice. They whispered quietly among themselves. The elders nodded. They understood that the first wife's presence had returned with strength, that the home's natural balance was being restored. Mutiso felt the weight lift from his shoulders. He had feared conflict. He had feared displeasing Wanjiku. Yet the quiet return of the first wife reminded him of the deep foundation upon which his household had been built. Naliaka continued her tasks with quiet authority. She did not shout. She did not demand. She simply moved through the house with the calm of someone who had endured and observed the world carefully. One afternoon, a small incident revealed the shift fully. Wanjiku had instructed the children to fetch water from the river at a certain time. Naliaka quietly suggested an earlier time, citing the heat and the safety of the path. The children followed Naliaka's guidance. The villagers noticed. They whispered softly. The elders nodded, and Wanjiku, for the first time, paused. She realized that her authority was no longer complete. The household had begun to reclaim its natural order. Evenings settled with the familiar sense of cooking fires and the distant laughter of children. Naliaka sat under the mango tree, watching the stars appear. Mutiso joined her quietly. Mumbi returned to her home, but promised to visit often. And Wanjiku, aware of the subtle shift, remained polite but subdued. The balance of the home had begun to return. The first wife's quiet endurance had guided it back. The village, ever observant, whispered in approval. The sun rose slowly the next morning. Life in Kilimani continued its gentle rhythms. Naliaka moved through the compound with calm authority. Wanjiku followed her quietly, learning that forceful plans were no match for patient endurance. Mutiso observed, feeling a quiet relief he had not known for many weeks. And the village, watching from paths and doorways, understood that the rightful order had begun to restore itself. The days passed slowly. Kilimani woke with the sun and settled under the evening stars with a calm rhythm. The children ran barefoot along dusty paths, laughing and carrying small bundles from the market. Goats wandered near the fences. Smoke rose gently from cooking fires. Life continued as it always had, yet the heartbeat of Mutiso's compound had changed. The quiet authority of Naliaka was now felt by everyone in the household. Wanjiku moved carefully, measuring each word and action. Her smile remained polite, but the confidence she had carried so easily before had begun to fade. One morning, Naliaka rose before the sun. She went to the river to fetch water. Her movements were steady and graceful. The children followed her lightly, carrying small jugs as they learned the proper way to handle the clay pots. She spoke gently to them, reminding them of care and patience. Wanjiku followed at a distance, directing laborers quietly, but aware that her instructions were no longer met with unquestioned obedience. Even Mutiso watched from the courtyard, sensing a relief he had not felt in weeks. The household was slowly returning to its natural rhythm. Word of Naliaka's presence and quiet authority had reached the village. Women whispered along the paths. Children shared small stories from school. Elders nodded knowingly under the shade of their trees. The judgment of the village had begun to side with Naliaka. They remembered her years of care. They remembered her fairness, and they recognized that Wanjiku, clever and ambitious though she was, had attempted to impose herself on a home that had long belonged to another. One afternoon, an incident solidified the change. Wanjiku attempted to redirect the children to a new task. Naliaka approached quietly, speaking softly to the children about the right way to carry it out. The children followed her instructions immediately. The laborers paused and exchanged glances. Even the neighbors who had gathered to offer advice observed the shift. Wanjiku's polite corrections were met with gentle refusals. The household had begun to assert its first rhythm once more. Mutiso, who had watched silently, now spoke carefully. He reminded Wanjiku of the traditions that guided the home. He spoke of respect and balance. Wanjiku listened politely, but could not fully assert herself. She had learned that her authority was no match for the patient endurance of Naliaka. She continued her tasks, but now with a sense of submission. The home had regained the quiet order it had once known. The evening settled with the gentle glow of firelight. Smoke rose into the calm night sky. Naliaka sat beneath the mango tree. The children played nearby, laughing freely. Mutiso joined her quietly. He spoke softly about the relief he felt. He thanked her without words, through the calm presence that reminded him of the life they had built together. Naliaka nodded softly. She did not boast. She did not gloat. She had endured. She had observed. And now, the home was restored. Wanjiku remained in the house but learned her place. She assisted with the chores but no longer attempted to dominate. She smiled politely at the neighbors and spoke gently to the children. The villagers noticed. They nodded quietly to one another, observing that the balance had returned. Mumbi visited often, guiding and supporting without imposing. The elders felt the household's harmony once more. Weeks turned into months. Naliaka's calm authority continued to shape the home. Mutiso supported her quietly, aware of the stability her presence brought. Wanjiku adapted. She learned the value of patience and respect. And the village of Kilimani, ever observant, carried stories of the household that had endured ambition and returned to balance. Children told one another the lessons they saw in the actions of Naliaka. Women discussed the subtle power of patience and endurance. Elders nodded, recognizing the restoration of harmony. One morning, Naliaka rose and walked through the compound. The children greeted her cheerfully. The goats wandered near the fence. Smoke rose lazily from the cooking fires. Mutiso followed her quietly, observing the ease of life that had returned. Wanjiku moved in careful steps, assisting where needed, and the village, watching from afar, whispered softly in approval. The rightful rhythm of the household had been restored. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, Naliaka sat beneath the mango tree and watched the children play. Mutiso joined her, carrying a small jug of water he had fetched. Wanjiku remained nearby, helping quietly without fanfare. The evening settled gently across the village. The fireflies began their slow dance. The wind moved softly through the trees. Naliaka allowed herself a quiet thought of relief. She had endured the subtle storms. She had watched. She had waited, and she had observed. And now, the home, the family, and the village recognized her place. The night deepened and the stars appeared in the clear Kilimani sky. The household slept with calm hearts. The village had witnessed the quiet restoration of order. The first wife, steady and patient, had reclaimed her rightful place. Wanjiku had learned the measure of humility. Mutiso felt the peace he had feared lost. And Kilimani continued its gentle rhythms, carrying stories of patience, endurance, and the quiet strength that restored harmony to a home and a village. The fire burned low, the children rested, the elders whispered softly, and Naliaka, beneath the mango tree, closed her eyes for the first time in many weeks with a calm smile. She had endured, she had observed, she had restored, and the village carried her story quietly, telling it to those who watched, to those who listened, and to those who would understand the strength of a life lived with patience and unwavering care. The home was complete once more. The rhythms of Kilimani continued. Life moved forward slowly. And the first wife remained the steady heartbeat of the household, honored by family, respected by neighbors, and remembered by all who witnessed the subtle triumph of patience and endurance.